The 459th edition of the Four Corners podcast starts right now.
This is the Four Corners podcast.
And that could make a difference. Lawson at the buzzer. Got it! Maybe not. Ty Lawson wins it at the buzzer.
Deep three. And Green rips down the rebound in traffic. 4-on-1.
What a great job. What a terrific job in transition. I mean, you couldn't plan that any better as a coach.
Gets the roll. Here we go. Page has it. Carolina down one. 84-83. Page into the front court with 4 seconds. Page to the rim. Got it! He got it! 9/10 of a second to go. Inbounds. Washington gets it to Warren. His full court shot. No good. Marcus Page baby. Does it for the Tar Heels. Carolina wins it.
Don't force it if you're Goss.
Comes in. Blocked by Meeks. Buried up ahead to Jackson. And he tucks it down for the 5-point lead. Matthews off the mark. And this year the confetti is going to fall for North Carolina. They're not going to be denied this time. Inside 30 overall. Love, top of the key. Oh! Big time delivery.
Here are your hosts, Josh Marlowe and Anthony Pagnotta.
Hello and welcome into another live edition of the Four Corners podcast. We're coming at you on a Saturday night, about 5 hours or so after Carolina picked up their most dominant, their most impressive win of the season, and it comes at a good time ahead of a week next week, which could either make or break Carolina's season as they'll face two top 25 opponents on neutral floors. And we're here to talk about today's win over at LaSalle. We'll do what we do in every recap edition of the show. We'll take a look at the box score. We'll go over a quote from Hubert Davis, deliver our stat of the game, overall thoughts, takeaways, game balls, and so much more. But let's go ahead and get right into this one because this is a fun win to unpack for Carolina. They get the win over LaSalle, 93-67, in a game that I don't even think was even as close as that final score would indicate. Carolina built a 42-25 halftime lead in large part because they went on a 20-2 run to take over the game after falling behind 8-2 in the first couple minutes or so of the action. And once they went on that run, they would never look back, and they sprinted their way to their most dominant win from start to finish so far this season. Carolina shot 54% from the field. They knocked in 11 three-pointers. They were as active defensively as they've been for as close to 40 minutes in a game so far this season. They held LaSalle to just 33% shooting in the first half and 25 first-half points. Both were the lowest first-half totals in a game so far this season. And the big talking point around this game is, as much as we would have maybe liked to talk about it being led behind a breakout performance or an efficient performance from R.J. Davis or Elliot Cadeau, it was another Tar Heel that if he can start to play the way he played today moving forward, it really turns the tide in the way this team's going to play. Cade Tyson was the best player on the floor today for Carolina. He scored a Tar Heel best 23 points, was 9 of 14 from the field, and was 5 of 10 from three. And that comes after just being 4 of 15 from three in the previous games combined entering today's game. It all adds up to Carolina for their most complete victory, and one that we should all feel good about heading into an important stretch of basketball starting next week in Charlotte.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of how I summed it up as well. I thought this was Carolina's most complete game. I know, you go back to the American game, and they only end up allowing 55 points in that game, but it still felt like in that first half, there were moments that you felt like Carolina was maybe in for a little bit of a battle. This one, after they countered the opening 8-2 start from LaSalle with a 16-0 run, it never felt like LaSalle ever threatened them again. And you saw this team come out, put together their best defensive performance of the year, building off of what was previously their best defensive performance of the year. So I feel like you leave this game encouraged. And then on top of that, you get what you get from Cade Tyson as well. That's a guy that we've really been waiting to see some positive signs for since that game against American. That was really the last time that you looked at him and thought, okay, he's going to be able to contribute for Carolina. Does this game guarantee that? No, but we've talked about it so much. The biggest thing for him is that he has to get into a rhythm from beyond the arc. He was 5 of 10 from back there today. That was really the source of the majority of his scoring, and that's what's going to allow him to succeed. He's not a guy that's going to be able to defend at a high level and affect the game on that end of the floor. So you need him to show up on that offensive end of the floor. He did that in this game where really through, the rest of the scoring was relatively balanced throughout the rest of the lineup. He stepped up and allowed Carolina to pull away late and not have to worry about, being in another tough game down the stretch like we've seen Carolina so often early in the season.
Well, the before you talk about rhythm with Tyson or anybody, the first thing you got to talk about is just confidence and a belief in their ability. This is a group that, we said after the Georgia Tech game, just looked unsure of themselves. And Hubert Davis said, look, we played tight. We didn't play free. We didn't play confident. We were afraid to make mistakes. We got to get back to playing free, playing fast, playing with joy. This was the closest this year's group felt like to the team we saw night in, night out a year ago, with just the way that they competed, the way they interacted with one another, the way they celebrated the success of their teammates. And it felt like, after a week off, even though this team has had a kind of up and down start to the year and they've had a lot of time off, this team needed that week, it felt like, to really just get in the gym and really just build up confidence in themselves because the talent's there. They're capable. They have the ability to play with the best that this sport has to offer. But none of that matters if you don't play with confidence. Execution is a direct reflection of how confident you are and what you're being asked to do. And so I think today, yes, Cade Tyson took a major step in the right direction. This whole entire team, I felt like, took a step in that right direction. And it felt like they responded to what seemed to be a very tough week of practice. It was an uplifting week, but their head coach challenged them, and their head coach got after them. And what we talked about so much a year ago was Carolina's ability to respond to being challenged. Because Hubert Davis was tough on that group a year ago. As much as he loved them and sang their praises, he coached them hard. And he was not afraid to hold them accountable in the media publicly. He's done that so far this season, and his team necessarily hadn't responded to it the way that I think they did today. And, you always look at games – you always look at moments during a long season for what could have been the turning point. We thought that American game was going to maybe serve as a turning point for Cade Tyson, was going to serve as the turning point for Jalen Washington. You go back to that game, they both played really great for Carolina in that second half. That wasn't the case. I think there's no denying that if Carolina goes 2-0 next week and they win 2 massive games going into the holiday break, and that really – sprints them forward to the type of year that we were talking about in the preseason, this will be the game that we look at and say that's where it all turned for Carolina. And the biggest thing I want to stress is you don't look at the opponent. Should have Carolina done what they did to LaSalle? Absolutely. It's the way that they did it, though. It was methodical, it was precise, and it was relentless at times where Carolina – even when they got down 8-2, I never worried about, oh, man, here we go again, because they were getting good looks on offense and they were competing defensively. And then once they got rewarded with the ball going in the basket, they went on that 20-2 run and they never looked back. And that was what happened last year. You go back to that Florida State game, Carolina went on a 22-0 run. to overcome a 14-point deficit. And from that point on, man, Carolina never looked back, and they became the team that they ended up becoming, which was an ACC regular season champion and a number 1 seed in the tournament. Not saying that this win is going to spring Carolina to those types of accolades. I'd love for it to, but you look at the way that they played, you look at the way that it competed, and it felt like for the first time this season, all the potential came together and it showed up on the court over the course of 40 minutes.
And remember, this was around the same time last year that everything started to turn. That last year was really that game in the Jumpman Invitational against Oklahoma. Maybe this year it is the game before they get to the Jumpman Invitational, and they probably needed it because, as you said, and I wrote about this in the recap article as well, confidence was the most important thing about this game. This is an opponent, man, this might be the worst team you play all year. This team is not good. We learned that at times today with some of the turnovers that they were handing out and everything like that. But at the same time, I do think that this was kind of what Carolina needed. They needed a game to sort of reset where they were mentally because, yeah, especially when you go through a long season, it gets draining. And when you lose 3 in a row, I get it, to 3 teams that probably should make the NCAA tournament, 2 of them who could very well be 2 of the best teams in the country, it still takes something out of you, especially, that game against Alabama where it really felt like Carolina didn't have many opportunities to win that game. It felt like early in that first half, you knew what the result of that game was going to be. And so for them to counter with this type of performance after a week off where we have, kind of wondered that type of time off, has that been a bad thing for Carolina? Has that sort of ruined any chance to build a little bit of a rhythm? For this group, they looked the way that they should have looked for the majority of the season. And what they're showing us now defensively is that they are capable of doing the things that we were questioning whether or not they would be able to do when they were struggling as bad as they were out in Maui. We wondered, is this a team that can actually find a way to turn it around defensively and be a good defensive team? And you're seeing that the way they've competed on that end of the floor in the last 2 games, they're showing you that they're capable of that. I thought, first 4 minutes of this game, I kind of disagree with you. I thought there were times where, you had Seth Trimble sort of sag off of a guy on the perimeter. It lets up an easy make from out there. Another time, they double in the post, leaves a guy wide open behind the arc. He ends up knocking down a shot. And I was saying to myself, oh, okay, slow start yet again. Here we go, at least on the defensive end of the floor. And then, after they get through that under 16 timeout, Carolina really just completely turned the corner, and you saw them sort of turn back to those things that they were able to do against Georgia Tech. You wonder if Hubert Davis said that to them in the huddle during that TV timeout that, hey, guys, let's not go back to what we were doing defensively for those games out in Maui and the game against Alabama. We showed against Georgia Tech that we can defend at a high level, and I thought from that point on, you saw Carolina competing just a tremendous amount throughout the entire game on that end of the floor. Led to 8 steals in this game, which is important. You had 12 turnovers from LaSalle. 8 of them are steals, which allows you to get out in transition. And Carolina points off turnovers, they had 16 in this game, which means that, with 8 steals, that means every steal that you had, you converted it into a basket. That's what you're wanting to see from Carolina, and that's what's going to lead this team to the type of success that we think they can have.
Let's take a look at the box score. It's a pretty one for Carolina. The Heels shot 54% from the field. They were 36 of 67. Meanwhile, they held the Explorers to just 36% shooting. They were 26 of 73. Carolina was 11 of 31 on three-pointers. That equals out to 32%. The more important thing was that you had a high volume of makes. Their quality of looks today were as good as they've been all year long. Meanwhile, LaSalle did knock in 10 of 29 three-pointers in their own right. Carolina did struggle from the foul line. They were 11 of 23. Not going to harp on that too much because you had so many of your big guys taking foul shots. Lubin and Claude combined took 8 free throws. And when those guys are taking free throws, you're not going to make as many as you would like. They were still +6 at the foul line, though, as LaSalle just 5 of 11 from the charity stripe. 11 turnovers for Carolina led to 5 points for the opponent, but Carolina forced 12 turnovers and scored 16 points off of them. Back-to-back games, Carolina has won the rebounding margin by double digits, this time 47-36. It was 35-22 on the defensive glass. Carolina did give up more offensive rebounds than they gathered. It was 14-12 in favor of LaSalle, but a big part of that, the amount of long shots that LaSalle was taking, did lead to long rebounds. Second chance points, though, in favor of Carolina, 11-7. Bench points behind Cade Tyson in favor of Carolina, 49-36. Points in the paint in favor of Carolina, 50-20. Fast break points in favor of Carolina, 16-6. Carolina with 22 assists on 36 made baskets. LaSalle 15 assists on their 26 made baskets. And all in all, Carolina led this game for 33 minutes and 47 seconds. So we'll now get into the quote of the game from Hubert Davis, and it goes as follows, quote, "I turned up the level of me. We want primary. If we don't have that, get into secondary. There's a job and responsibility out there. There's no more my bad, I'll get it the next possession. Every possession counts. Let's be detailed in our approach." And I told them, what is detailed in our approach? I said, trying ourselves to the small things, the discipline details that allow us to be successful, setting the screens, executing, getting to our spots, spreading out on offense, boxing out, making contact first, diving on loose balls, getting to the free throw line, talking on defense, all those things, end quote. And I think this is the first game that you can that I can say confidently that every possession I thought Carolina's competitive character is where it needs to be for this team to win. You could argue this lineup, this roster top to bottom is more gifted than the roster that you had a year ago. But with some of your deficiencies in the front court, you've got to make up that with effort. And for whatever reason, once this team got to Hawaii, there was not that competitive spirit that you saw over the course of 40 minutes. It came in waves. And when Carolina did compete, you saw what they were capable of, but you were trying to build to playing to as close to 40 minutes as possible. And I think you got there. You got there today as close to 40 minutes as this team has played all season long. And that's what the non-conference is supposed to do. It's supposed to get you prepared for your conference season. The problem is that unlike most teams, Carolina hasn't played cupcakes every time out. They've played at number one Kansas. They played, 3 quality opponents in Maui. The team that you beat in Dayton beat the number 5 team in the country today. Like, that win is looking even more and more impressive for Carolina as it is right now. You come back from that, you get reacclimated from the time change, and here comes a top 10 Alabama team that's capable of winning an SEC title, going to the Final Four, and maybe winning a national championship. Carolina needs these types of games. When you're building your roster, the way you got to rebuild it through the transfer portal, you're integrating 2 high-caliber freshmen. You need games like this where you can just work the kinks out. And I thought they did that. And they were coming off exams this week, and I thought in more ways than one, this team passed the test in ways they haven't done so far this season.
Yeah, I mean, and look, when you put together the type of performance that they had defensively, that's where a lot of people are going to focus. But, I mean, for me, I thought one thing that was really impressive was you had a week off, you went through exams. It was far from the best crowd that you're going to see in the Smith Center. And all of that usually would lead to a slow performance out of the gate. I mean, look, it was a 4:00 game, but even still, sometimes it feels like those are the games where you start out a little bit sluggish. And, I mean, Carolina just came out, seemed like the energy was there for the most part, even in those first 4 minutes. But once they went on that 16-0 run, that's really where you started to see the energy, the life come back into this team. And that's where the confidence started to shine through. So this was exactly what this team needed. They needed a game against a mid-major team, an opponent that, probably came in feeling the same way that they did, maybe even a little bit worse with some of the losses that they had suffered so far this season. And I think Carolina was able to sort of gain back some of the issue or some of the success that they had early in the season. I think it really just started when they were out there in Maui. And I do wonder, honestly, did they waste so much energy trying to come back in that game against Dayton that it left them exhausted for the game against Auburn? Then you go to the game against Michigan State. They eventually get that one to overtime, but you just wonder if that team came out of there worn down and were never really able to regain their legs. This week, I think, it helped that you got the time off, but also, being able to focus on something else, focus on the exams and take yourself away from the fact that, man, this team is 5-4. Yeah, we're coming off a win, but even that wasn't all that easy. And it seemed like just a burden had been lifted off of these guys' shoulders, especially once they were able to put some distance between them and LaSalle. So hopefully this is something that carries over into what is an extremely important week coming up here for Carolina.
Stat of the game, I went points in the paint. Carolina was plus 30 in that category. They outscored LaSalle 50-20. And you're not going to find a dominant performance from anyone in the front court, although Ben Allen Lubin was very efficient. He scored 10 points, was 4-4 from the field, grabbed 5 rebounds. James Brown scored 6 points, was 3-4 from the field. And those were the guys that really led the way. You count Jalen Withers, he added 7 points, was 3-5 from the field. One thing that Carolina has to do, regardless of the point production that they're getting from the post, is just put the ball inside and make the defense clamp. And that's what they did today. Now, granted, they had maybe not a decisive height advantage, but their bigs were more athletic, more physical, more gifted than what LaSalle had. But there's no denying that being able to dump the ball inside to Ben Allen Lubin or James Brown at different times in the second half opened up the offense for everyone else. And it made the game easier for the guards. And it's why you got as many quality looks as you got from behind the three-point line. And so I think it's something that, Hubert Davis has talked about, attacking the post or the painted area through post-ups and through penetration. But Carolina hadn't really just dumped the ball inside to their bigs and work off of that. It's all been the guards getting downhill, trying to finish among the trees. And they're capable of doing that. But when you're going inside against guys that are 6'8" and taller and your guards are 6'2" and smaller, the odds of them finishing those plays more often than not aren't going to be as high as you need it to be. And so I thought that was a great adjustment. No, you don't have an Armando Bacot to dump the ball inside and get you a guaranteed bucket or a trip to the foul line every single time. But you still got to attack the defense that way. And I don't think it's a mistake that they scored 50 points in the paint and the offense looked as explosive as it did before, when this team was in Hawaii, scoring 90-plus points out virtually every time they took the floor.
Yeah, and I mean, look, it's not going to be consistent. I just don't see that happening moving forward. I just don't think that this group of guys at the 5 position are really capable of consistently giving you the post threat that a guy like Armando Bacot did, or, the guys that we become so accustomed to at Carolina back when Roy Williams was here as head coach. But I think you saw today, there's a way to get creative when it comes to putting the ball in their hands and allowing them to score. I mean, for Ben Allen Lubin, I think one way to really do that is just allow him to get on that offensive glass. The second chance points can be very impactful. We're also seeing that that's part of Tyjon Claude's game as well. And he's a guy that it feels like you can put the ball inside to, and he can potentially back a defender down, especially if they are, the same size as him. But it's when you get to some of those bigger guys, that's when the issue is going to present itself. The guy I was most impressed with was James Brown. I thought that late in the game, when LaSalle still had their starters in, Brown got 3 touches inside consecutively where he finishes and just looked more like a post player. Got the ball on the low block and just went to work. And that's what this team is really missing. That's why it's been so difficult for Carolina to score at certain times here, really since they went out to Hawaii, because there's no easy buckets for Carolina, it doesn't seem. You can never just put it into the post and let a guy go to work. And so hopefully a guy like James Brown can be able to do that. Maybe Tyjon Claude gets a little bit better at finishing inside. But I think, the paint points, you're going to see a lot of that still be guys driving to the basket and getting downhill. And that's what we've talked about so much. In this game, you get to the foul line 23 times, which is good, not as good as some of the games that you had early in the season. But I thought the thing that they did really well with that was early in the game. That's kind of how they set themselves up on the offensive end, was they were getting to the foul line, drawing fouls, and allowing themselves to get those points there with the clock stopped. And eventually that rhythm sort of carried over to the shooting as a whole for the team. And so I think we've talked about it so much. We talked about it when we previewed this game, but we've talked about it all year. When this team is at its best offensively, it is when they are getting to the foul line. So I really like what you saw there today, and hopefully that's something that can carry over for Carolina in the 2 games that Carolina plays this week.
All right, let's get into more thoughts, more takeaways from the win over LaSalle. Carolina with a 93-67 win in their final home game for it'll be about 2 weeks before we see Carolina back at home in the Smith Center. The first takeaway that we really got to talk about is they built off their defensive performance after what they did against Georgia Tech, holding LaSalle to just 25 points in the first half. 34% shooting, both first half lows for Carolina in a game so far this season. You also look at the fact that just for the game, LaSalle shot just 36% and 34% from behind the 3-point line. And the biggest thing is that I thought Carolina from the word go was as aggressive as they've been on that end of the floor, and that's what set the tone. Their defense created their offense. Their 20-2 run that turned the game over to Carolina and they never looked back was all created by what they were doing, mainly in the half court, because it was really after Carolina built the lead, that's when Hubert Davis started to pick up the pressure. But their energy, I thought, in the half court today was the best it's been so far this season. And I thought the way they defended ball screens, the communication was really good. I thought they rotated really, really well. They were contesting. It felt like every single shot that went up, there was a hand up. And they were just in LaSalle's hip pocket for as close to 40 minutes as possible. And, going into the Georgia Tech game, Carolina was 59th, according to KenPom, in adjusted points per possession defensively. They were 44th entering today's game. They've now jumped up to 36. Like they're making that ascension that we saw this team make a year ago in that area, which was becoming a really good defensive team from an analytical perspective. And I think you really got to just tip your cap to the staff, because they're the ones that had to make the adjustments. They're the ones that have to, really hone in on that. And Carolina has done a better job protecting the paint without a rim protector. And it starts with their guards. I think RJ Davis, Elliot Cadeau, their ball pressure has been so much better, and their ability to contain the dribble drive and not get, and this defense isn't getting broken down possession after possession, is the reason why they have taken this step forward defensively. Because if those guys are going to get beat on the wing more often than not, Carolina's going to get carved up. They don't have a natural rim protector.
Yep.
And so you got to be able to contain the ball, and they've done a much better job at that. And then I really thought with the way Carolina pressed, with the game in hand in the second half, showed the attitude, showed the mindset that, okay, what we talked about in the preseason, North Carolina's here. What are you going to do? We don't care we're up 18. We don't care that you're here to get a paycheck. We're going to beat the crap out of you, and we're going to press you, and we're going to make your life a living you-know-what until that final horn. And that's something that we kind of been asking for this team. I've been almost begging for it. And you saw that today with the way they got out of there, or they got after them defensively. So reminiscent of what we saw from this group a year ago, and it fueled one of their better offense performances in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, and it really started after that 8-2 start from LaSalle. You really saw them crank up the pressure. They forced 7 first-half turnovers. And once you're getting out on the run and you're getting easy makes at the basket, I thought that really changed everything for Carolina in this game. And that's something that we've been looking for from this group, because they did it early in the season. They were so good at creating those turnovers. Guys, with Elliot Cadeau, Seth Trimble, guys creating turnovers out, 30, 40 feet away from the basket because of the pressure that they were putting on guys. And so I think this is what you want to see moving forward from Carolina. The press, you saw it in that second half. I thought that was something that, showed that maybe this is something they're going to use a little bit more of moving forward, because Hubert used it once in the first half. Carolina makes a basket to make it 11-8. He presses, and it forces an easy turnover. I mean, one thrown right to Seth Trimble and results in a lay-in. And so I think they're going to be strategic with how they use it. But I definitely think that going into, 2 difficult games, you then have one game before you go into non-conference play, or into conference play rather. And I think you're going to see this team sort of crank things up even a little bit more on the defensive end of the floor. But you're right. It really starts with the guards who have defended at a much better level. One of the issues that you saw happening was, yes, Carolina was leaving guys open on the perimeter at times. They were sagging off just a little bit, or were going under ball screens. Those are certainly big issues. But the biggest issue is when you're allowing guys to drive to the lane and either finish, or it brings a double and guys are just kicking it out, and it turns into passing around the perimeter until you get to a guy that is left open because there was a double team. And so today, Carolina did a much better job of staying in front of these guys. I mean, you look, coming into this game, Cooper McKeithen was the leading scorer on this team, or Corey McKeithen, was the leading scorer on this team. In the first half, Carolina completely shut him down. He didn't have a single basket, only shot one time, and only played 11 minutes because he wasn't effective. So Carolina took away their biggest threat and made him pretty much useless at times in that first half. That's something we haven't seen this year. Typically, the guys that are supposed to play well against you are the guys that have been standing out, have been scoring a lot of points in the first half and putting Carolina in a hole. So I love the way that this team competed on the defensive end of the floor. And if they can find a way to continue to create turnovers like this, they know how to get out and run and finish at the basket. That's something we shouldn't be worried about. And I think if they do that, if the guards can continue to put this type of pressure on opposing guards throughout the remainder of the season, Carolina has a chance to be just as good defensively as they were last year.
We got to talk about Cade Tyson. He was Carolina's best offensive player today. Scored a career high during his brief tenure at UNC, 23 points, 9 of 14 from the field, 5 of 10 from 3, 5 rebounds. Also did all that just in 21 minutes. You're talking about a guy that entering today's game was averaging less than 3 points per game, had played like 8 minutes over the last handful of games combined, and got an extended extended run today from Carolina. This is the Cade Tyson that we thought we were getting upon his transfer arrival from Belmont. Mm-hmm. This was the second highest coveted perimeter shooter in the portal. He shot 46% at Belmont a year ago, right behind Kobe Bray, who transferred into Kentucky and has had an impactful start for the Wildcats. Hasn't been the same, though, for Cade. And, we referenced the American game, hoping that was going to be the turning point, and it hadn't been. And then he had just a dreadful time in Hawaii and didn't really play much once Carolina got back from the islands, but got a lot of run today and was the source of Carolina's offensive outburst. And, we're not going to expect this every single night, but what he provided from the perimeter is something that if Carolina can get that more consistently, it does change the dynamic of this team. I think there's a scenario where you could argue he's the best shooter on this roster with the way that RJ Davis has struggled to shoot the ball so far this year. And with the way that RJ shoots a volume of shots, he's never going to be as efficient. There wasn't a shot Cade Tyson took today that was bad. I mean, every shot was in the flow and the rhythm of the offense. More importantly, he took them with confidence. And he was shooting to make the ball or make the shot, not shooting the ball to miss the shot. And, I hope this is the turning point for him because you saw what he's capable of doing. You saw that he can be that stretch four that opens the game up for everybody else. I thought he competed on the defensive end of the floor. It's going to look a lot like Brady Manick, where he's going to do it with his effort, not with his skill set defensively. He's a step slow. His body isn't going to allow him to compete with some of the bigger four men that he goes down and battles in the post with. But he was the best part of Carolina's offense, and hopefully this was a turning point for him because if Carolina can continue to count on his perimeter shooting more moving forward, it'll make Carolina's offensive lineups more versatile and make them harder to defend.
Yeah, because that's the spot on the floor that we've seen teams typically leave open this season. They've left those stretch four guys open, whether it's been Jalen Withers, Drake Powell. The problem is that there's just not a consistent threat there right now. And with Jalen Withers, I think we've just kind of come to the conclusion that ain't going to happen. He's not going to be that consistent threat. Drake Powell could eventually be that guy, but he is a freshman. It makes sense why he doesn't have that consistency there just yet. So I think right now it's important that Cade Tyson is contributing for Carolina there. And also, I mean, if Cade Tyson can start to make shots from the outside, I know he's not great defensively, but at times Carolina could use a two-guard lineup and have Cade Tyson out there with Drake Powell or Jalen Withers, whoever, to give Carolina a little bit more size, which is something that could help them against some of the bigger teams that they have to play, not allow these guys to be able to shoot over them as easily. That's the thing that we've been afraid of with going to those bigger lineups is that the offense just isn't there. But you saw it today, 5 of 10 from beyond the arc. That looks a lot more like the kid that we thought we were getting. And here's the other thing. There's games like today where he goes 9 of 14 overall from the field. So if he's 5 of 10 from beyond the arc, that means he was 4 of 4 inside the arc. He's a guy that's capable of scoring at multiple levels. He's not just a guy that has to stand out there and shoot threes. So that's the thing that you're hoping to see from him. Hopefully for everybody in this game, you wanted them to gain a little bit of confidence. But I don't think it was more important for anybody than for Cade Tyson to gain that confidence because it just has not been there the entire year for him. And hopefully this is the game where he turns a corner. Does this mean that we need to see Cade Tyson playing 25, 28 minutes a game? No. But I do think what it shows you is that hopefully in these next few games, Cade can continue to contribute and sort of develop a little bit of a role for Carolina, because if he can be that guy that can knock down the outside shot at a pretty consistent rate, that would be a huge help for Carolina on the offensive end of the floor.
Also important to point out, Carolina 22 assists on 36 made baskets. Elliot Cadeau 7-1 assist to turnover ratio. So a big bounce back performance from him after you could argue that his performance against Georgia Tech was his worst individual performance we've seen from him during his time at UNC, and really made you question how much longer could Carolina afford for him to be on the floor 28 plus minutes a night.
Yeah.
But Hubert Davis has been defiant about how important that he is, and he is the guy that unlocks everything that Carolina does, whether it's in the half court, primary, secondary break, or whatever. Elliot Cadeau has his fingerprints all over it. And Hubert said it in his press conference today after the game that the last couple of weeks, their shot selection hasn't been great. But a big reason why was that they were not making that extra pass to take a good shot and make it a great shot. Too many times Carolina was taking contested jumpers. And look, I think guys like R.J. Davis, Ian Jackson, they have the ability to shoot with the hand in their face and put the ball in the basket. These other guys, like, they're capable, but Cade Tyson is going to put the ball in the basket more often when he's wide open. Seth Trimble is going to be what he is when he's getting off clean looks. I don't want to get too inside basketball here on a Saturday night. This was the best Carolina has screened in a game all year. Yeah. And it's those little things that once you clean up, it's amazing how different of a shot that you're getting. But the ball movement also was a big reason why Carolina was able to be as effective as they were, because instead of taking good shots, they were taking great shots. And you saw the offensive ability and the scoring prowess return to where Carolina was doing so in an efficient manner, not just scoring because they were playing a number of possessions, but because they were just getting quality look after quality look. So, hopefully that's something that can stick moving forward, because if the ball moves the way that it moved today, then I think you'll see the game start to get it easier for RJ, and it'll make the game easier for the other guys, and they'll put the ball in the basket more often.
Yeah, I mean, look, I said just a minute ago that Cade Tyson needed this more than anybody. Maybe, maybe not. Elliot Cadeau, this was huge for him, and still not scoring at the rate that you're hoping. Still doesn't look really all that confident in his shot right now. But the most important thing is that he is sharing the basketball at a high level. And I mean, you just look at the backcourt for Carolina in this game. The three starting guards combined for 16 of the 22 assists. So as a whole, that group was just passing the ball at an incredibly high rate. They committed just 5 turnovers between them, including just 1 for Elliot Cadeau, which is an amazing step forward for him. Because you mentioned it, that Georgia Tech game, I mean, there was a stretch where every pass that he was making was going out of bounds, was overthrown, or guys were having to make sensational plays just to be able to prevent it from being a turnover. In this game, looked much more confident, was controlling the pace of the offense. That's exactly what you want to see from these guys moving forward. And yeah, against teams like Florida, who's ranked in the top 10, is undefeated this year. UCLA, who seems to have found their stride after a down year last year, is ranked once again. You're going to need Elliot Cadeau to play at a high level, and hopefully this was the game that allows him to return to that level of play that we saw from him early in the season, at least as a passer.
Let's get to our discussion topic. We are running late here on a Saturday night, but do we appreciate everyone that's hanging in with us live and, of course, listening to this on the audio platform. Going into the week off, Hubert Davis said his team needed to get healed. And we talked about when we previewed the game, what does that look like? Because that was a real odd word to use, considering his team, outside of Tyjon Claude, who missed the Georgia Tech game with the cortical abrasion, Carolina was relatively healthy. But it was more of a mental thing where they just were a less confident group than what we had seen the first week and a half, 2 weeks of the season or so. It's fair to say that they looked healed. They looked more confident. They looked more sure of themselves. They executed at a high level. They competed at a high level. I mean, Carolina was up 28 at the under 4-minute timeout, still full court pressing and still forcing turnovers and looking to score off of that. That's a mindset type of thing when you're doing that late in the game with the win already in hand. And I think what it does is it sets the table for a really big week for Carolina, a big week of opportunity. And if Carolina would have won out there today and won the game by 12 and then looked shaky, we wouldn't feel pretty confident they could win 2 games next week that I think they're capable of winning. And if they were to win those games, it would go a long way to securing themselves a spot in the 2025 NCAA tournament. The thing that I stressed, and I'll reiterate this again, don't look at the opponent. Don't look at who LaSalle has lost to in the early parts of the season because they have some ugly losses. You look at the way Carolina played. You look at the way Carolina competed. You look at the way that Carolina executed. That's the expectation. That's what we expected from this group from the opening tip to where we are right now. And so I think today we serve them as a great reminder of their ability and what they're capable of doing against any level of competition when they play hard, when they play smart, and they play together.
Yeah, and I think in terms of the healing thing, I think they definitely did. I think really he definitely was, I think, talking mentally because that stretch was incredibly draining. And I feel like that game against Auburn really took a lot out of this team. It really ruined the confidence of this group for that stretch that happened afterwards. I don't know why, because Auburn was one of the best teams in the country. But I feel like Carolina felt like going into that game, they should have competed. They should have had a chance to win that game late. And it never really felt like that. They were dominated inside. They turned the ball over a lot. And for some reason, that really just stuck throughout the game against Michigan State. Now, they battled in that game, found a way to get it to overtime, but couldn't pull it out. And I think that one probably hurt them a little bit as well. That was just another blow to the confidence. And then the game against Alabama, you're at home. This is a team that you desperately want to beat because of how last year ended. And you were thinking, okay, in our own building, we got a good chance to win this game. And they came out, hit you with a couple of punches early, and you were just never really able to respond. And so after that, even in the game against Georgia Tech, you could see that this team was really overthinking a lot of things. That they definitely seemed like they were down on themselves, especially on the offensive end of the floor. And so I think that what Hubert Davis meant was this group needed to really just have a couple of days off to rest, not think about what was going on the basketball court, and just reset. Because when you're not thinking and you're just playing basketball the way that we know that you're capable of, it's going to lead to a lot of success. And that's what you saw in this game. And we said it earlier, that's exactly what you needed going into this stretch. Because, yeah, you're getting ready to go up against Florida, a team who's ranked in the top 10. Now, you're going to be in Charlotte, so that gives you a little bit of an advantage. That's not going to be an easy game. That's going to be just as difficult as the games against Auburn and Alabama. You're hoping that those games sort of prepare you for what you're in for. And then UCLA, that's a team that's ranked 22nd coming into today, but they'll probably end up climbing. And that's a team that's, I think, playing some of the best basketball that we're seeing right now out of the teams in the Big Ten, probably setting them up for a chance to have a really successful season. This is a very, very important stretch for Carolina. And we cannot stress that enough, because when you get into conference play in this conference, you pretty much have Duke, Clemson, and Pittsburgh. And as we know, with Clemson and Pittsburgh, we can't even guarantee that those teams are going to be that highly ranked when you play them. Outside of that, I have no idea how many other teams are going to be legitimate tournament teams at the end of the year. So the mindset going into these games needs to be that these are games we need to win. If we want to have any sort of a tournament resume going into conference play, this is where it starts. And that's why it's important to at least split, if not sweep, the games the remainder of this week.
Let's hand out some game balls before we get out of this edition of the podcast. I'll go first. I'll take the layup, if you will, and give the game ball to Cade Tyson. 23 points, 9 of 14 from the field, 5 of 10 from behind the three-point line, grabbed 5 rebounds. He looked comfortable. He looked confident. And more importantly, he had fun. And there's a lot to be said about playing this game with joy in your heart. Because when you do that, it makes doing all the little things that are a lot tougher, like scrapping with the bigger guy for a rebound, diving on the floor for a loose ball, closing out, on a rotation where you got to maybe cover, an extra 5 to 10 feet. All that stuff comes easier when you're having fun. And he got showered with love on the court, got showered with love off the court. The guys threw a bunch of water and Gatorade on him in the locker room, and it was rightfully deserved because he had his best performance so far in his Tar Heel career. We hope to see more of this moving forward. So for today's game ball against LaSalle, I give it to Cade Tyson.
Yeah, I'll go with Seth Trimble. Played the most minutes of anybody in this game, was a plus 18, scored 10 points, 4 of 7 from the field. Did not hit a shot from beyond the arc, but everything inside the arc was going down for him, and did pull down 8 rebounds to lead the team. Just an all-around great effort from him. I thought also a couple of shots early in the game that were really big, while guys like RJ Davis, Elliot Cadeau weren't seeing their shots go in. RJ, the shots eventually started to fall for him. But Trimble is that type of guy. We've seen it a lot this year, where some games he's not really blowing you away, but he's making the important plays. And I think especially early in games, you've seen him be the guy that sort of carries Carolina, is the calming presence. And I thought that's exactly what he was today. When Carolina got off to a little bit of a slow start, he was the guy that sort of helped counter everything and made a huge difference in this game for Carolina.
Well, that's going to wrap up this edition of the Four Corners podcast. Before we let you go, guys, we do encourage you to visit the website. That's HeelToughBlog.com, where the news and the coverage just continues to roll forward. Anthony took you through the recap of today's game. I had a family Christmas party to attend, so you can go and check out his recap of the win over LaSalle. I'll be back getting you ready for the game against Florida later this week in the Jumpman Invitational. As you could imagine, the football news continues to come left and right. We've got articles up about a big-time commitment that Bill Belichick secured, the first of many high-profile assistants that may be set to join his staff, and another guy that has already withdrawn his name from the transfer portal, a big get for Carolina's defense going into next year. All that coverage, basketball and football, you can find at HeelToughBlog.com, and we encourage you to visit the website every morning, every afternoon, and every evening for the latest and the best Carolina basketball, Tar Heel football coverage. As for the podcast, you guys know where to find us. Every major podcasting platform, simply search the Four Corners Podcast, and we will pop up there. We encourage you guys to rate, review, and subscribe. That way you don't miss any editions of the show throughout the remainder of the basketball season. Well, with that, guys, this is going to wrap up this edition of the show. I do thank Anthony once again for hosting with me. We want to thank you guys for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.